Welcome to the ITSP Magazine Podcast Network. You're listening to a new episode of the Founder Pack Podcast, where your host, Brendan Rod, brings startup stories from experienced founders and other functional experts to help current and future founders get inspired and grow their knowledge with quick, tactical insights. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Hey Damien, welcome to the show.
Hey Brendan, thanks for having me.
Thank you for taking the time. How is your week going so far? What's going on in your world?
I'm just getting settled from back into work from more of a summer vacation mode and a little bit nervous and excited about a baby coming. We're having a baby girl in a week or two. So yeah, my life's going to change a bit soon.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations. And I'm excited about today's conversation. We're going to be covering remote work, the rising rates for developers, how to hire and recruit top-notch developers, and more. But before we jump in, perhaps you could just share a little bit about you, your background and your company and anything else you'd like to share.
Sure. Yeah, well, I started Scalable Path back in 2010. I think the impetus for that was I was managing a team of software developers in India for a digital agency in San Francisco. And I was up, at 11 at night in the dark, communicating with the US and thinking to myself, this is not optimal. And when I came back to the US, I started working with some developers in Latin America, and it worked really well, and kind of split off from my previous company and started working with talent down there and sort of grew from there. And now we have a platform with over 25,000 developer profiles. And yeah, we help companies find software developers, project managers, designers, data scientists, basically technologists. So that's what my company does.
So your company was kind of born out of that classical, I'm solving a problem that I experienced for myself, and that's where you saw a product market solution.
Yeah. I think you could say that's true. And I did see a quote recently. An entrepreneur is someone who jumps off a cliff and then builds a plane on the way down. And I thought that was a little bit over dramatic. I mean, we didn't have to do anything crazy like that. My previous company became our first client, and we had business right away, and we just grew organically and sanely from there. It wasn't a crazy risk or anything. We just grew slowly over time.
There was a recent controversial podcast episode with Malcolm Gladwell, and we were chatting off camera that you had some thoughts and opinions on that.
Yeah. There's been a lot of influential people weighing in on remote work lately. Elon Musk, for example, and then just the other day, Malcolm Gladwell. I think both of them are going counter to a trend toward remote work that is going to be really hard to stop, because remote work is so compelling for so many reasons. And I'll just list a few and end with the most important reason. But, it saves companies and employees money. It saves people time. They don't have to spend time in their car commuting. They don't spend money on gas commuting. They don't burn fossil fuels and emit greenhouse gases while they're commuting to work. People are often more productive without interruptions at the office. But most importantly, people want to work remotely. There's a large and growing number of talented people out there that have gotten a taste of it, and they want to keep it. They want to have the ability to spend at least part of their time working wherever they want. And if you are an employer and you're not open to that, then you're going to miss out on those people. And there's some very talented people I mean, I'd just ask yourself, do you want to work remotely at least part of the time? Well, let me ask you that.
Definitely. So I'll give you my feelings in more than just a one-word answer. I used to hate remote because I wasn't used to it. I only knew one way. And I also didn't have the infrastructure in my living environment to work remotely. But then once I started working remotely and then the infrastructure started coming along and I understood what remote really meant for me, I was like, wow, I can never go back after this. But with the caveat of, for me, it's not black and white. I do feel like it's important to have that FaceTime with the team. So I think hybrid, it's a good middle ground. Maybe it doesn't have to be 3 times a week, but for me, I think once a week or maybe twice a month, it's enough. But that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think that, it depends on the individual. It depends on your role. I mean, Elon Musk was saying everybody has to come back to the office. You're just pretending to work but if you're working on a manufacturing line at Tesla, you got to go to work. There's no question. But if you are writing code or if you're doing marketing and all you do is sit in your laptop and you get on Zoom and Slack with people all day, even if they're in the same office, half the time you're on Zoom and Slack with them anyway. So, and I have a friend who goes into the office. He says, I ride my bike into the office and I go there and there's no one there. I have it all to myself. It's amazing. Like the office is not always even a place where you connect with people.
Yeah, there's this hilarious meme that I saw a couple weeks back where it's like, come and join our amazing culture and environment. And then there's like a desk with a phone sitting there in this cubicle and everything else is dead around. There's no employees. So I was like, yeah, that could ring true for many companies
Totally.
at the moment. But one thing I would also add just before I let you continue, I also feel the productivity aspect is huge.
Oh, yeah.
I'm working from home versus in the office. There's so many more distractions personally than working from home.
Yeah. I mean, yet again, certain individuals, like I'm the type of person who does not have a problem focusing. There are probably some subset of people who might get distracted, or feel temptation to.
Sometimes it's not you. People are coming to knock on your door.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
That is undeniable, right? Like people your coworkers coming to chat with you, whether it's for work or not. That happens. That's a huge factor, right? You ask people, or yourself, like if you've got a big deadline, like you've got a big project that's got to get done, where are you going to go to get it done? You're probably not going to go to your office because that's not where you're going to get that real focus time. You're going to go somewhere quiet, like work in the morning where no one can bother you, or at your home office, or a library. That's where you get real focused work done.
Yeah. Before we move on to the next bullet points, do you want to add anything else to what Malcolm Gladwell had to say in his podcast?
Well, yeah, he was saying, you can't be a part of something. You are what you do. And I would totally disagree that you can't feel like you're a part of something and be remote. I mean, I'm on like probably 2 or 3, maybe 4 meetings every day with different teams. And, you hop on the Zoom and maybe the first couple minutes, you're all kind of joking around, chit-chatting, kind of sharing stories. And then, the rest of the meeting, you're doing work, but you're, if you're all working together toward a common cause, like the mission of the company, like that feeling is not limited to being in the office. And one woman I work with, she said, I'm more fulfilled in this job that's 100% remote than I've than in any other job. And my last job was in the office, and it was a totally toxic environment. So that is not a fair thing to say about remote. Feeling like you're part of something does not really matter whether you're in an office or not.
And do you think it was like 100% genuine, or do you think it was trying to get clicks and impressions and people talking?
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I mean, there's a term that I recently became familiar with called Edgelord. And, I had to Google it when someone called Elon Musk an Edgelord. But I think Gladwell's doing something similar where you're just being contrarian in order to get attention. And maybe that's what they're doing. Or maybe it's that people at the top of companies, at the top of organizations, feel more comfortable or secure in it, and they're probably working remotely anyway, but they want their people coming in for some reason. I don't get it, but I can tell you this, that I saw a headline, everybody's over against work except the workers. And the thing is that workers matter, that workers' opinions matter, and they're getting more and more power in the relationship between the employer and employee. And it kind of comes back to my main point, is that the workers want it, the people want it. And if you want to attract the best people who want that, you're going to have to kind of give in to what they want a bit. It's not about just the companies setting the terms.
Yes, and I think that this remote work framework is still feeling itself out, and CEOs and managers need to work out the kinks in how you get the best of both worlds and cater to Gen Z and millennials, baby boomers. Without putting you on the spot, are you a boomer or millennial? How do you classify?
What am I? I was born in 1975. So am I Gen X?
I think you're Gen X.
Yeah.
Yes. So the reason I'm asking you that is I think it's uncommon in the mindset of Gen Xers and probably boomers as well to be pro remote. There's this feeling that it's mostly like millennials and Gen X CEOs and leaders that are more accommodating and understand, this shift and are embracing it.
Yeah, I think maybe it also has to do with that I'm in the software startup space, and this is one space where it's just absolutely become the norm. If you go outside of that into other domains like finance, they're really fighting it. But I don't know. We will see. I think a lot of trends start here in Silicon Valley and then they spread from there. And I think that you're getting some pushback right now, but it will eventually infiltrate other people, other industries will see the light, and it'll slowly permeate into other industries. But I think that the software startup space is probably the leading edge of the trend.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic, and we could definitely spend a whole episode breaking it down. But there's so many great topics that I want to chat to you with about today. So we'll have to move on to the next one. There's another challenge now, which is the rising rates for developers, the high demand. How do you propose startups and even just regular companies overcome these challenges? Is it just like suck it up and pay more, or do you have other strategies for getting around this issue?
Well, before I go into that question of like what's your strategy for overcoming that, I do think that there are some trends that are influencing this. Number one would be just the software industry in general is a very strong industry that's healthy. During COVID, when a lot of industries were really crippled, software just was even invigorated because it was an area that was enabling us. It's always been something that you can do from anywhere, whether you're using software or working on software. Companies like Zoom just went through the roof. People needed more online tools when they were in their homes quarantining. So the software industry boomed, and that created demand. There was a lot of venture capital investment going on during that time. And at the same time, there aren't, at least in the United States, there's still, our education system hasn't, caught up to producing high quality developers, to the level that demand requires. And so there's a sort of a limited supply. There's more people entering into the market, but there's still, when you're looking for really good developers, there's this particularly limited supply.
So can we segue for a second or take a sidetrack? Why is the US not up to the level of other countries like Israel, Ukraine, Russia, Romania? You talk about Latin America. What do they have that the US doesn't have?
I'm not an expert on that subject, but my gut tells me that the tide is turning a little bit here. I do think you, and I don't have stats to back this up, but at least when I was growing up, I think that a typical path for a lot of people was getting more of like a liberal arts degree. And I think in other countries, they do a better job at elementary level all the way up through university, like teaching math and science. And there's more of an interest in young people in learning those subjects and those skills. In the US, maybe, I don't know what it was, but I personally, the first time around, didn't feel like going in and killing myself in undergraduate studying calculus. I just kind of was, like a lot of kids, I was just kind of going to college and trying to have a great time and learn things that were like interesting to me. And at that time, math and computer science wasn't that interesting to me. It took a little bit of a real world reality check for me in my 20s that my degree in geography wasn't going to take me where I wanted in my career. And I ended up going back and doing the hard work and getting a second bachelor's in computer science and doing all the math. But I think, to answer your question, I just think our country doesn't do a great job teaching math and things that lead into things like computer science and getting young people motivated and interested in pursuing those careers.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And sorry for interrupting your train of thought. Do you remember where you were, or should I?
Oh, yeah. So we were just saying like what the trends were that were putting the pressure on rates to go up. And so, one of the what I would say to people who are trying to hire, it's sort of common sense advice. I would say it's like, be flexible. We were talking about remote, like be open, keep an open mind to different ways of hiring and different ways of engaging with people, whether it's in the office or remote or as full-time employees or contractors or through agencies. I would try a wide array of approaches. You could try to get referrals from your network of employees. You could post on job boards. You could engage with recruiters. You could try development companies or agencies and see what works, and just keep an open mind. Make sure, like, if you want to be sure in this marketplace of global talent and tech talent that you are getting the best value that you can, you want to make sure that you're trying lots of different parts of this market, and then you start being able to compare different options. And then if you've done your research and spread a wide net, and then you can see, okay, well, we've spent the past month trying to fill this role through these channels, and now these are our options. we're picking the best option that we can, and we're going to go with it. So kind of common sense results, or common sense advice, but that's what I would say.
Yeah, and it makes sense, so no pun intended. But can we also take it one level deeper now and maybe go into more of the strategies and tactics and kind of success, let's say, cases you've seen in order to hire top talent efficiently, quickly, successfully?
I mean, are we talking about how do you sell yourself as a company, or how do you make yourself attractive as a company here? Is that?
Yes, with the high demand, how do you increase your chances of success in getting that top talent?
Well, it kind of goes back to my previous comment. I think you should try lots of different things. And there's a little bit of, it's not a level marketplace. There are individuals who might have the same results for you, or someone even that would have better results for you, who you could be significantly less expensive than someone else. I mean, there's the global marketplace, and there's different costs of living in different countries. And if you're open, and that's one thing that remote enables is which is a huge advantage that we didn't even tap into or didn't even talk about, is tapping into a global talent pool. Once you embrace remote, you can hire anywhere. And for example, you're going to be living in Brazil soon. Your cost of living is going to be less. Brazil is a huge country. Brazil is our number one country that my company sources talent from for software developers. It works great for the US, and it works great for Europe. And if you can tap into markets where the cost of living is less, both parties can win. The developer can be making a bit more than they would make working for a local company there, and the company can be paying less than they would be paying for a local developer, and everyone's happy and doing better financially than they would if they were just working within their own country's economy.
If we will look at some of the other levers that one can pull in trying to hire this talent, I think you mentioned the technology, the company values, mission, job description. Can you maybe spend a few minutes just sort of wrapping that into the mix as well?
Yeah. I mean, we've been talking a lot about money. I mean, yeah, that matters to people. If you want to make your company attractive and attract good developers, that's always going to be a reason why people will work for you if you pay well. But I think for developers, perhaps even a greater motivator is working on cutting edge technology, working on technology stacks that are going to increase their own value in the marketplace. Like, I know developers who will work for significantly less if they think that the technology that company is using is going to be in higher demand in the future. Not only do they find it more interesting to work on cool and new technologies, but they want to future-proof their career and be able to have it on their resume. Like, if you're a mobile developer and you're getting a chance to work on a Flutter project, people are like, yeah, I want to do that. I'll take a little pay cut even to work on that because it's cool. And I think that's where the industry's going. If you've got a old legacy code base that's a mess and a developer got to, get in there and figure out all your messy code and work in a dated technology versus getting to write a project from scratch themselves in a cutting edge stack like Node or Python, they're going to take that. They might even take it for less money. So that's a huge, your tech stack makes a difference. And then, of course, people, as we said before, they want to be part of something. They want to feel like they have a purpose. And if your company helps people or has a mission that they can get behind, you definitely want to share, hone what your mission is and share that in your job description and share that when you're trying to reach people, because that really matters. I mean, all of these things kind of matter in different degrees to different individuals, but that's a huge influencing factor for especially, I think, younger generations that probably like boomers and even Gen Xers don't really relate to as much. I've noticed it more with younger individuals, that really matters to them. And then culture, I mean, we kind of experience this a lot in the dev world, like, kind of a culture of trust and respect. I mean, with all this remote work, there's kind of this thing that's being worked out about like surveillance and what's okay and what's not. And, some companies are trying to use tools like Hubstaff Tracker that, takes screenshots of your screen while you're working and manage your keyboard activity. And I understand why companies want to do that, but it's generally like off-putting to talent and to employees. And I think that they want to feel trusted and not like they're like big brothers looking over their shoulder all the time. And so finding the right balance of like, because it's really hard in a remote world, you can't see who's actually working. So you want to measure them. And that's a valid desire to, and companies that are going to succeed in the remote workspace are going to be ones that measure performance, not just time in the office, right? And so you're kind of coming up with these like KPIs to measure individuals. And that's something we've got to come to terms with, as I think every company is going to have to do this. And we're dealing with it ourselves. Like, how do you measure someone's productivity without being a creepy big brother? Because you do want to know how people are performing. That's a valid desire, but you don't want to alienate them. So yeah. And then of course you got to put all of these variables that we're talking about, like compensation, technology, your values, your culture, into a really solid job description and put that out there. So writing a great job description that is going to attract those people that you want to find is hugely important. So just some thoughts there.
Yeah, no, those are great points. Perhaps maybe to wrap up this portion of the show, can you speak to the differences in hiring, Gen Z developers versus, maybe millennials or boomers, Gen Xers? Do you see any major differences personally that you think are worth commenting on?
I think, the one that I said already was kind of the one that I've seen, like the younger generations, I think, put a higher priority on values and mission. They want to feel like they've made a choice in their lives that they're going to work on something meaningful and that does good in the world. And I think that's a great thing that people are making a priority as they come out of, the education system nowadays. But I would also just say that it's not really related to different generations per se, just that in the technology space, things change so quickly. Like, you could be a JavaScript developer and, 1 year, jQuery comes out, and the next year it's like Moo tools. And then the next year it's, Backbone, and then it's Angular and React, and then Vue and Svelte. And there's always some new framework coming out, and you always have to be learning. And I think that ability to learn new things and change how you think about coding is probably the most important attribute that you can have as a developer and look for as someone hiring. It's not just someone who's good at coding right now in the technology stack that you have. Like, there's other soft skills that are more important than just rolling that back to your question about hiring in different generations, things change so quickly that someone who's 3 years out of college could actually be super good at a certain technology, better at a new cutting edge technology than someone who's been coding for 20 years. Yes, that 20 years of experience is worth something, but the way that programming paradigms are changing, like event-driven programming languages like JavaScript, like if you've doing 20 years of coding in a, procedural way, and then you need to shift the way your brain thinks toward event-based. Like if you went through school learning the new event-based way, you might be way better at thinking in that way and coding in that way with a modern framework than someone who's 40 years old and had 20 years of experience. But that's not to say that 40-year-old person couldn't have taken the time to educate themselves and learn new things and shift the way they think too.
Maybe for me, the takeaway is that also having, other than the ones you mentioned, is having diversity.
Yeah, there's definitely, the development world is not the most gender diverse world. That is for sure. I don't really know all of the reasons, and that's a whole other subject. But yeah, the women are underrepresented in this segment.
Yes, not just in coding, unfortunately, but shifting into another discussion. I think it was your team or you wrote an article many years ago, and I would assume it still holds true today, but it would just be interesting to reflect on if you still agree with what you wrote back then. I think the article was called 7 Qualities That Differentiate a Great Programmer from a Good Programmer. Would you kind of run us through that quickly as well, just for the sake of our time here today?
Yeah. And I kind of touched on that a moment ago when I was saying that, the ability to learn quickly, teach yourself new things is probably the most important quality. That's one of the qualities that we mention in that article. And the gist of that article is really that, when you think I've got to hire a developer, you might think I want the person who's the best at coding, my app, right? Like if my app is a PHP and, it's a Laravel and React app, I want the best Laravel and React coder. But I think that's a kind of short-sighted and not optimal way to look at things. And the main point of the article is that there's other soft skills that are probably more important than how someone's going to perform on a test in your code stack. Like you want to work with someone who has a positive attitude. You want to work with someone who has great communication skills, someone who knows how to manage their time and manage you, as their boss, like ask, if they're managing up, right? As we said, quick learning ability. Definitely having deep and broad technical experience is an important characteristic, but I'd put it down there around like 5 out of 7. And, of course, things like being a good team player, like when you're doing a big release and it's time to everybody to kind of suck it up and put in some extra hours to get this release out the door. Are they going to be there and pull through for you and have a good attitude? That's a huge characteristic that you want. And, keeping the right focus while they're coding, thinking about the big picture, like thinking about the end user, thinking about how the changes they might make in one area of the code base might affect other parts of the code base. Those ways of thinking and those other soft skills are more important than just, if they really know a certain programming language really well.
And excuse me for the potentially dumb question. I'm not from the developer world, but how important is critical thinking as a developer, or is that a given that you should have that quality?
I mean, critical thinking is is a skill I think that underlies even is more fundamental than the skills that we're talking about. And I think when we were talking earlier about education in our country, I mean, I think that we should be teaching critical thinking more. And I think it's a hugely important skill, probably more importantly, just in life in general. But definitely applies to, the role of a software developer, and would be a fundamental skill in a few of the higher level skills that we mentioned, like keeping a big picture focus and thinking about how the user would experience the product that they're working on. It's involved in self-learning, I bet. It's involved in time management. It's involved in a lot of the important soft skills that are more important attributes of a developer than just coding language skills. Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with that.
So if I will put my critical thinking cap on for a second, perhaps the salary piece could put more focus on those soft skills, critical thinking, and then find someone that's cheaper but has those core traits, but they're still a good developer. And therefore you're kind of figuring out how to maximize on your budget by looking for the right things and not just going like expensive doesn't automatically equal better, I guess is my point here.
I mean, people will eventually, like, that's just the function of employment. But yeah, some of the best people I've worked with as a CEO, they might have been quite affordable. And in fact, sometimes their rate was so affordable that you almost think, sometimes if someone quotes a very affordable rate to you, you might think, oh, they're not as good. Like that's a kind of a weird bias we have as consumers. I remember I learned it as a kid. There was like 2 airplanes at a store, these like wind up airplanes. And I bought the more expensive one because I thought it was going to be better. And my friend bought the less expensive one and it was better. And I learned that lesson early on. And there's been a few instances where in my career as a manager, like you really recognize that someone who might be quite affordable is super talented. And it's often because of these other skills that you notice. They're just a go-getter. They have a really great attitude. They are eager in their career. They're smart. They turn things around quickly. They anticipate needs. And those people, sometimes if you identify them, you can get a good value out of them, but you also have to reward them, right? And if you just don't increase their pay as you lean more on them, as they become more important to your company, then they may get poached. So eventually hopefully they reach an equilibrium because they are worth it. They do have a value, and you need to compensate them for their value. So, there's kind of a weird balance here where, yeah, you do want to find value as an employer, but not too much, because you want to be fair, and you want to compensate people for their contributions, not only because it feels right, but also because if you don't, then someone else will, and you might lose that person.
You wrote another article that I wanted to touch on, 7 reasons to choose Latin America for your development outsourcing. So is Latin America still a hotbed for talent, or have other markets opened up and taken the lead?
Yeah, it's still super hot. I would say it's still the hottest. I mean, I think other regions that come to mind for software outsourcing or finding remote software developers, that come to mind were, India, of course, was like a leader, right? That's in the past. And then Eastern Europe has always, not always, but before Latin America was a strong source of well-educated, technical thinking engineers. And Latin America was a little behind the curve on getting into software development, but they did invest in their education system and started turning out a high number. There's a good population bases there in around, cities like Bogota and Sao Paulo and Rio and Buenos Aires. And they started producing a lot of talented young developers. And then they had an advantage, I think, on the time zone over these other geographies when you're talking about the US market. And to some extent, I mean, Eastern Europe is great for the Western European market, but for the market I'm in the US and Silicon Valley, Latin America has a massive time zone advantage for real-time collaboration. Additionally, the culture in Latin America heavily influenced by European Western culture. So there tended to be a good cultural affinity to working with. It's easy to get along with developers from that region and find commonalities. Like sometimes I noticed when I was working in India and I'm working with other developers in Asia, in that culture, it's a little bit traditionally harder for people to be comfortable with conflict, particularly with people that are thought to be in a more senior position with them within an organization. So there might be a hesitance to speak up if something was wrong or maybe voice a differing opinion. That's a little more of course you cannot, stereotype or generalize, like that's all comes down to individuals. But as a general rule, I feel like in my experience that there's been more of a ability for developers in Latin America to speak their minds and maybe raise flags if there's a problem on a software project, which is valuable.
That's a fascinating topic, actually, to take into account the cultural norms of each country and continent, because I guess you would recommend that if you're going to work, it's important to learn the cultural differences when you're going to work with cultures you have had little, interaction with in the past.
Yeah. There was even a study, I think it was about, I think that there was something about air traffic control accidents. It was like the study that kind of demonstrated this cultural difference, where I think that in this study, certain air traffic controllers in Asian countries were not raising red flag situations to their superiors if the superior, I don't know the exact details, but it led to more accidents because people were not comfortable speaking up when something was going wrong. And so I want to be really careful generalizing and putting people from different areas into, and stereotyping them, because I've worked with some very excellent developers from all over the globe, and there are definitely people in any country that could be capable of being an excellent communicator and those that could be not. So you really have to evaluate people on an individual basis. But those are, as a general rule, there is a cultural affinity between the geography of Latin America and the countries like the United States that have been influenced by Western culture.
Thank you for sharing. I think it's important to look into and understand. I thought of something to close out the episode with. One of the founders in my group recently posted, and I'll keep him anonymous, of course. He had like a rant that he wanted to get off his chest, and it's something that I think would close the session out nicely, because this is an area of your expertise. So I'm going to just kind of read his post here and see what your thoughts are. So he wrote, just a rant trying to identify and vet out companies to get more developers on board. Talking to a slew of companies that offer everything from dedicated developers, project-based engagements, and fully outsourced product development companies. and it seems like extremely bloated quotes are the norm of the day. As part of our vetting and interviewing process, we have been asking companies for a detailed plan and quote on a project that we have already completed. It took us 2 weeks with a fraction of one developer's time and cost $300. The pricing and timeline we are getting are beyond irrational. 2 to 3 months with 2 developers and $50K price tag in dollars as one example. Have any of you fellow founders run into such howlers? It seems like it will be a huge time savings to have a list of companies to avoid. Crowdsourced between fellow founders. Sadly, a lot of these companies were referred to us by others. We are yet to talk to a company that gives us a rational estimate so that we can actually talk to them about our real needs. Frustrating. And by the way, I referred him to you. So there you go for your time on. Hopefully that will lead to something for your time on today's episode. But what are your thoughts in response to that? Is that something you're familiar with and something that your platform would resolve? Any advice for him?
Well, I'm very familiar with that subject. Number one, the different engagement models of, hourly versus project-based, where you do fixed bid. And I did some fixed bid projects in the past, and I quickly realized how difficult the problem of software project estimation is. And it's actually one of my things I've really dived into deeply. I have an article called How to Write a Accurate Software Project Estimate. Probably not the exact name of the blog post, but we even built a tool that we recently converted back into a Google spreadsheet that's for estimating software projects. But the pitfalls in that system or in estimation and not having a crystal ball have led me to work only on an hourly basis. And so, what I would say to your friend is that if you engage with someone on an hourly basis and you engage with them, you meet with them like on a regular basis, like we suggest a daily scrum, like put 15 minutes on the calendar every day. So if you've got a project and it's about finding the right individual developer or team of individuals that you believe have the traits that you want and can trust. That's the number one thing. And then you have to manage them or, have someone on your team or someone on that team that manages them who you trust. But you won't get, if a company like our company, like Scalable Path, like if we can bill hourly, we don't have to pad estimates because we know that there's no risk of misunderstanding the requirements and then losing money on a fixed bid project. You can just put a reasonable markup on each hour. And then if you've got a talented developer who has the skills and they're being given well-defined tasks, they're going to work efficiently to complete that. And the project will take what it should take. And the client won't be billed an outrageous sum, and the developer will be paid for all of their time, and everyone will be happy, and they can even have a more collaborative work relationship. Because when you do a fixed bid, you have to spend a lot more time upfront defining every little requirement, which is actually not even healthy, right? Or else you have to take time out during the project to do change orders, which are time consuming and kind of confrontational. And if you work in a more agile hourly basis, you don't have to spend an exorbitant amount of time doing the project estimate up front. You can just I recommend spending a few hours defining your project, doing then getting a very wide estimate. Like you might say, well, this is going to take $20,000 to $30,000. You should always be talking about ranges, but you just get a ballpark. Okay, are we generally aligned on what the sort of best case and worst case scenario is on how we're thinking about this project. Is the developer and the client are they both comfortable with these best case and worst case scenarios? And then you get in to working on an hourly basis. And if the requirements change, which they usually do, and that's a healthy thing because you learn through seeing the product evolve and you want to iterate, then when it comes time, hey, the client says, hey, we would like to do this. And then you can have a collaborative and unbiased discussion about whether you should add a feature or remove a feature, because you're not quibbling about whether that was in scope or not. If you do a fixed bid, as soon as that contract is signed, the client's interest is to get as much as they possibly can into that scope. And the developer's interest is to get it done as quickly as possible. And that puts the relationship at odds a little bit. You can escape that a little bit. But I know I could talk for a whole other podcast on that subject, but those are some of my thoughts.
Yeah, and I'm going to point him to you so you can take it further with him, hopefully, and help him out, because it definitely sounds like he is pretty frustrated at this point. But I appreciate your recommendations, so that's great. I appreciate it. You also reminded me about all the articles we were discussing, so I'll add those in the show notes so that people can actually go and reference the articles we were talking about, and your quote estimator or project estimator. I think that's an awesome tool to share.
We've got a product requirements document article on how to define your requirements, which is like the precursor and the necessary work that you have to do in order to get an estimate. And then we have another article on how to do a software project estimate. Yeah.
Perfect. This has been an awesome episode. Is there anything you want to add before we wrap up here today?
Well, I could say I thought of a fun fact about me that we could splice in.
Well, we can have it now at the end. We don't have to go in order, so I don't mind.
Okay.
It's just as fun.
Okay. Well, I'm working in my van right now, so I had to get out of the house from the wife and kid who's on summer vacation, and I'm just doing my podcast in the van, and I'll be doing another one tomorrow morning. It's my little haven.
It's your man cave replacement. Your
van van.
Awesome.
I think it's a new automobile category that's already started, but the automakers haven't caught on yet. The man van.
I like it. Cool. Well, again, Damien, it's been a pleasure. If anyone wants to connect with you, what's the best way for folks to reach out and pick your brain or get in contact?
I would tell them just go to scalablepath.com and you can fill out our contact form, or, better yet, if you're a software developer or project manager or designer and you're looking for work, you can sign up as a freelancer, or if you're a client looking for those kind of people, you can click the orange Hire Now button and tell us all about what you're looking for, and we'll get back to you right away.
And are we allowed to add your LinkedIn profile to the show notes as well?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Cool. Well, thanks, Damien. Thank you again.
Thank you, Brendan.
You're welcome. Have a good one.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Founder Pack podcast with Brendan Rod, part of the ITSP Magazine Podcast Network. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share the channel and itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey.